Dostoyevsky was a gambling addict who fell deeply into debt due to his addiction and found himself in dire straits, loathing himself for it. However, Dostoyevsky one day thought that his obsession with gambling might actually help him in his writing career. He had an idea for a book about a gambler, someone with a mind just like his own. After all, who better to understand the psyche of a gambler than a gambler himself? In a letter to a friend, Dostoyevsky described his idea for a book about a gambler as follows: "I have in mind a man who is open, highly cultured, yet fundamentally incomplete, and has lost his faith. What is crucial, however, is that all his vital energy and rebellion are channeled into roulette. He is a gambler, driven by the need to take risks which elevates him in his own eyes, but deep down he feels it is a base thing." The whole story is about his 2-year adventure of playing roulette in various casinos. Dostoyevsky kept this idea of a gambler in the back of his mind, but he needed to be in a tight spot before he could start working on the book. By 1866, Dostoyevsky was so deep in gambling debt that he was obliged to pay off his debt to Dostoyevsky. If Dostoyevsky couldn't finish this book within a month, he would lose the rights to it. In a letter to his friend, he mentioned that he would write about the gambler he had described. Dostoyevsky began working on it immediately, and his first step was to engage a stenographer named Anna to help him quickly transcribe the book. Hours, days, and weeks passed, and Dostoyevsky managed to finish the book successfully. But there was a problem. Dostoyevsky was scheming to sneak away with the copyright. At that moment, Anna, his assistant, offered a suggestion. Dostoyevsky took the manuscript to a police station and managed to get a receipt with a historical record to protect himself from Dostoyevsky's trap. The story was truly Dostoyevsky-like, writing a book about gambling to pay off gambling debts. Don't be fooled by the fact that Dostoyevsky wrote this book in a month. The Gambler does not give the impression of being hastily written. Although it doesn't have the complexity of the brothers Karamazov or Crime and Punishment, it is considered one of Dostoyevsky's lighter works, yet it contains profound observations about the psychology of addiction. Moreover, the book can be classified as semi-autobiographical, reflecting Dostoyevsky's own experiences as a gambler. The protagonist, Alexei, is a young aristocrat who stays with a Russian general and teaches his children. The general has a stepdaughter named Paulina, whom Alexei falls in love with. Paulina is erratic and confused, and the general is in trouble because he owes a large sum of money to a French friend. The general hopes that his wealthy aunt will die soon, which would relieve him of his debts. In the book, this elderly aunt is referred to as the grandmother. The story revolves around financial tension, with characters either in debt, waiting to be paid, or looking for a quick way out. Eventually, their paths intersect with gambling. Alexei, the gambler, wants to help Paulina, who needs money, by winning it from gambling. The wealthy aunt turns out not to be as close to death as everyone hoped. In fact, she ends up getting deeply involved in gambling and loses a significant amount of money. The general is furious about the money disappearing from the inheritance, while dealing with the pressures from the French creditor. In the midst of these events, an introspective English character observes how gambling destroys these people. But the character who suffers the most from gambling is Alexei himself. We see that this intelligent young man squanders his reputation, love, and potential due to his gambling addiction. Now, let's examine Alexei's gambling psychology closely. When he recounts, "I quickly spent the 200 gulden I had, doubling it, and kept winning. I believed that within 5 minutes, I had 4,000 gulden in hand. At this point, I should have left, but I started feeling a strange urge. I felt an urge to challenge fate, to defy it, and I bet the entire 4,000 gulden on the highest stake and lost. Then I bet all the remaining money on the same number and lost again. Afterward, I left the table dazed. It shows that gambling was exciting him. The more he won, the more he wanted to win, feeling that a higher power was favoring him. The grandmother fell into a similar trap. After losing a significant amount of money, she continued to gamble, convinced that she would recover her losses, and ended up losing even more. Alexei likened the grandmother's situation to a skier sliding down a snowy slope, increasing speed, and losing more money. The grandmother fell into the gambler's fallacy, believing that after several red outcomes, the next spin must be black, which is a misunderstanding of probability. Alexei, however, did not fall into this fallacy and won money by betting on red when it kept coming up. Alexei was fascinated not by the mathematical or probabilistic aspects of gambling, but by its intuitive side. He sometimes played without calculations, trusting his instincts, and won substantial amounts, believing that fate or a divine force was favoring him. Gambling became a mystical experience for Alexei, where even the most improbable ideas seemed possible. Gambling gave Alexei a sense of excitement and fulfillment, but it also took away from him. His love for Paulina dwindled, and he even allowed his winnings to be squandered by a frivolous woman. An English character, who had been observing, harshly criticized Alexei, stating that he had wasted his potential and could have been of use to his country. Alexei learned that Paulina had loved him all along, but gambling had blinded him to this truth. The English character pointed out Alexei's wasted potential and predicted that he would continue to gamble away his life. Dostoyevsky's depiction of gambling psychology is so authentic because Alexei is a reflection of Dostoyevsky's own struggles with gambling. Readers inevitably become curious about Dostoyevsky's own battle with gambling. Dostoyevsky's struggle to overcome his gambling addiction was not easy. Even after writing a book about the destruction gambling brings, he continued to gamble. But there is good news. Dostoyevsky was so taken with Anna, the stenographer who helped him with the book, that he proposed to her just 8 days after finishing it. Their marriage was troubled, largely due to Dostoyevsky's gambling addiction. At times, he even pawned his wife's belongings to cover his debts, feeling deep shame about it. Dostoyevsky's relationship with his wife was akin to a sinner's relationship with God. Just as a sinner seeks forgiveness but continues to sin, Dostoyevsky would apologize and vow to quit gambling, only to fall back into it. Anna believed that Dostoyevsky's addiction was more about the cathartic aspect of gambling rather than a mere desire for money. Dostoyevsky used gambling as an escape from his emotional turmoil and focused solely on the spinning roulette ball. After the death of his brother Mikhail, Dostoyevsky saw gambling as a way to escape his depression. Dostoyevsky wrote numerous letters to his relatives about his gambling problem. In one letter to his first wife's sister, he boasted about having a system to always win and expressed confidence in his ability to win, but the reality was different. Shortly after sending that letter, Dostoyevsky found himself begging for money from his family. In another letter to his brother Mikhail, he described a recent gambling session where he won a large amount but soon lost it all. Despite his earlier claims of having a system, he ended up with nothing, even pawning his watch in Geneva. Dostoyevsky spent years giving away his time, intelligence, and money to gambling. Yet, an experience similar to a moment of enlightenment awaited Dostoyevsky. After losing all his money again, he had a moment of realization about the absurdity of gambling and promised his wife never to gamble again. This time, he kept his promise. The turning point was that Dostoyevsky finally confronted the harsh realities of gambling and recognized the false hope of winning big. He acknowledged to himself that he had been living in a delusion. In his other book, The Brothers Karamazov, Dostoyevsky described this self-deception and its dangers. He wrote about the consequences of lying to oneself and not recognizing the truth. Dostoyevsky's realization about gambling was a profound moment of self-awareness, much like Raskolnikov's confession of his crime. Dostoyevsky admitted his addiction first to himself, and his eventual decision to quit gambling was a result of facing the truth about himself and his life.